Today we're going to be starting off on page 128 in the 14th book of Israel, He Who Rules as Yahweh, Sin Never Again, Part 2. In chapter 11 here, the title of this sermon is The Pope Says, Do Not Follow the Ten Commandments. They are only written by men. Follow instead the evil gods of Genesis 3, verse 5. And this sermon was given November 1st in 2014. Okay, 2014. And the first thing that caught my attention was, right here where it says, the Pope says. And, this Pope here, he's skilled in trickery and deceit, and he's pretty crafty, and he's doing these things. But, Yahweh in his wisdom gave us something that's going to help us in these last days, which is called Yisrayl Says. Okay, so we have the Yisrayl Says program that's going to counteract all of these unrighteous teachings by the Pope and the Vatican administration. And so when we're looking at the teachings of the Pope, don't follow the Ten Commandments. Okay, don't follow the Ten Commandments. These are the rules written by men. Remember years ago when Pastor had said, and I can't remember his exact words, but he was saying that Yahweh knew that mankind would stray away and wouldn't keep all 613 laws. But he gave mankind something, to guide them. Who remembers what those things were? The Ten Commandments. Yahweh gave mankind the Ten Commandments, to guide us. Okay, and this is what Yahweh did. And so in these last days, we see the Pope saying, don't even keep the Ten Commandments. And this is what was holding us back from going completely overboard. And now, by removing the Ten Commandments, you can see how mankind will go completely overboard, right? Can we see that? Not honoring our mother and our father, completely doing away with the Sabbath day and all of the things that Yahweh tells us to do. Remember, the first 4 commandments show us how to, our relationship with Yahweh, how to reverence Yahweh. And the last 6 shows us how to deal with one another, the love for our brothers. Remember, Yeshua said, the greatest of the commandments is to love Yahweh with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second one is just like it. Love your neighbor, love your brother as yourself. So the Ten Commandments show us how to get along with Yahweh and with man. How to be in unity so that we can have peace. And what did the Pope say? Don't do it. Don't do it. And I brought a newsletter from years ago, and something else that the Pope, and it wasn't this Pope, but here's something else that the Pope said. Remember this one? Okay, don't mention the name of Yahweh anymore. It needs to be removed from all of those hymns and songs and so on and so forth. And so you can see that this is something that's been going on for a very long time, these teachings of this administration. And so you should also be remembering what the prophet Jeremiah went through. Remember, he was preaching in the name of Yahweh. Y'all remember that? And what did they tell Jeremiah? We will kill you if you continue to preach in the name of Yahweh. Okay, now, was there anyone who was preaching in the name of Yahweh that was murdered before? Right, Abel was the first one, right? That's exactly who I was thinking about. Okay, Abel, and he was murdered by the first pope, right? Who was the first pope? Cain, right? So you see where we're going here? All the world has gone after who? Cain, the first pope. Okay, so nothing has changed, nothing new under the sun. Okay, nothing new under the sun. All the world has gone the way of Cain. Don't mention the name of Yahweh, we'll kill you, we'll persecute you, whatever. But we need to be just like these guys, this mixture of righteousness and evil. And this is what Pastor is trying to get us to understand. If you're not in the house of Yahweh, keeping all of Yahweh's laws, then you have a mixture. And when you have a mixture, then you're allowing death to enter in. So let's start here. Now, verse 1. Right here in the middle, it says, may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. The peace of Yahweh is Yahweh's laws. Get that in your mind. That's what Yeshua said. And I wanted to read that to you because this is something that Pastor says to us every time he speaks to us. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. So even in his intro, he's teaching us to keep Yahweh's laws so that we can be in unity with Yahweh. Remembering the Ten Commandments, remembering all of Yahweh's laws. How we need to conduct ourselves with Yahweh and with one another. Okay? And then he goes on and he's saying here in verse 3, he wants us to remember what the Pope has said in his letters. He said that, are we open to the gift of God's salvation? Now remember, he said, peace is a gift of God. And when he was asked, well, did you go to pray at the rock wall, the Wailing Wall? He said, yes. And didn't you come back to Rome and invite them here to pray for peace? Yes. Well, why aren't you having peace? He said, I think it comes with merit. Okay, are y'all remembering this sermon now? Because, Pastor, I remember being here when Pastor was saying this, because he was kind of laughing a little bit, because, with the Catholic Church and their teachings, you don't have to do anything but believe. But merit is something totally different. And he says, well, now here, he's saying it's free, it's a gift of God. And on the other side of his mouth, it's coming out, well, I didn't get my prayers answered, so it must be coming with merit. Well, what merit, Pope? What merit is it? Putin just gave you the answer. We need laws that we can live with, okay? We need laws that we can live with. And this is something, that the world leaders are seeing, Remember, Putin just said here recently that we're headed towards nuclear war. Okay? He's like, I don't know why people can't see that. The way that we're going, we're headed towards nuclear war. And just a couple of years ago, he said, we need laws that we can live with, that we can all live with. Okay, and further in this verse 4 here, where you see Putin, it says, Putin, the president of Russia, gave them the answer. You need laws. You need laws you can live with. The laws that you have stink. These man-made laws, okay, they stink, okay? They stink. Remember in, let's take a look at this, Daniel 7:25. Okay, Daniel 7:25. It says, and he will speak great words against Yahweh and will wear out, mentally attack to cause to fall away the saints of Yahweh and think to change times, Yahweh's feast days and laws. Okay, that's the key right there, and laws. The Pope is trying to change these laws. And they will be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of times. So I wanted to read that because it's the Pope or this administration that's changing these laws. These are the laws that stink. The ones that they changed Yahweh's righteous laws to these laws that does not have a benefit for mankind. These are money-making laws and things like that they have on the books. And the world leaders see it. They're fighting constantly, but they're saying this is in the name of peace. Okay, but you can't have peace when profit is the motivating factor or one of the motivating factors. Okay, so here in verse 5, Pastor goes on and says that education, okay, character education in righteousness is the only thing, and of course, submitting and coming into unity with these laws will bring, this is what is going to bring great teachers. And he says you've got to have great teachers in order to bring unity. Okay, we have to have teachers, great teachers in order to bring unity, teachers of righteousness. So this is Lamudja class, right? Okay, remember what Lamudja means? Students of the law. So in order to be teachers, we first have to be, like the sign says, taught. Okay, we have to learn what to teach. So we have to be excellent students in order to become excellent teachers, practicing everything that we've learned. Not just, in the mind, like, yeah, I believe in Yahweh. The laws are righteous. And then when a conflict arises, you forget everything that you've learned, everything that you believe in, and then there's arguments, there's fighting, or whatever the situation is. Okay, we have to put these teachings in action. We can't say that we believe Yahweh and then argue and fight. That's not how the kingdom of Yahweh is going to work. Okay? Yahweh needs people that's going to do exactly what the house is teaching in these last days. I have a question for you. What is it that we're trying to get Yahweh to believe about us? Exactly. We're trying to get Yahweh to believe that he can trust us. We're trying to show him that he can trust us. Okay? And if Yahweh can trust us, then, he can send us out and we can do everything that he desires for us to do. There will be peace, joy, and abundant living if he can trust us. If he can't trust us, we're not going to be there. I didn't expect that answer to come so soon. That kind of threw me off there. But praise Yahweh. But that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to show Yahweh he can trust us. Okay? Remember what pastors taught us about the Deuteronomy to the Timothy. We should always be thinking about that. Being trustworthy and knowledgeable of Yahweh's ways so that he can send us anywhere and he know that we're going to do exactly what we were taught to do. We're not going to try to establish a church in our own name. We're not going to try to get tithes and offerings, to build up our kingdom. We're not going to do those things. Everywhere we go, we're going to be just like Yeshua. You know, I can only judge according to the one that sent me, because his judgments are just. You know, that's going to be our attitude if we allow these teachings to set in our minds. You know, if we apply these things in our everyday lives. But if we don't apply them, you know, Yahweh's not going to be able to trust us. You know, and it's very important that we get Yahweh's trust. Let's continue on here. In the top here, verse 6, Pastor kind of shifts gears a little bit. Okay, so first he's talking about the Pope and character education, and now he's talking about the soil. Okay, he's talking about the soil, and it's like, well, why would Pastor jump subjects like that? You know, remember Yeshua said, you don't understand my language because you what? You reject the law and the prophets, right? He said, you can't hear me, you don't understand me because you're rejecting the law and the prophets. But we're not rejecting Yahweh's laws or his prophets. So we should be able to hear Pastor, not just hear him, but we should be listening to him. Okay, so that when he shifts gears like this, going from character education or the Pope and starts talking about dirt, what dirt got to do with it, Pastor? Why are you talking about dirt? But if we're listening, we'll see that he's teaching us this great information that's necessary for us to be great teachers. So here, he said, we have here this is verse 6, we have here a scientist's dire warning about destruction of soil. And people push this off, but let me tell you, this is really serious right now, what this man is talking about. An international soil scientist is calling on government to focus attention on the most important issue facing the world, soil quality. It's a real crisis that we're facing here and what they've got themselves into. The mess they've got the soil into is what he's talking about. He says he says 90% of our food comes from annually sown crops growing in soil. And Pastor says, well, any fool ought to know that. We have to grow our food. We have to grow our food in order to eat it. Your fruits, your vegetables that you're told to eat to keep you healthy, okay, you grow it in soil. Well, what have we done to our soil? And that's what this man is telling in this article, the things we have done to the soil. And he says soil feeds us. So soil is very important. And remember, let me ask you this. Pastor told us a long time ago, he said, one of the jobs of the priest is to do what? Guard the food supply. So is it necessary to know how the soil works and the importance of soil? It's important. It's necessary, because without food, guess what? You're not going to make it. You know, you're not going to make it. Okay? And so it's important to know how Yahweh created things. Remember, I think soil, if I'm not mistaken, I'd have to go back to the book of Yahweh, but I think Yahweh created vegetation on the third day. Okay, on the third day, so he made, he made the light, he separated light from dark, then he made water, separated the water and the expanse, and then I think it's the soil. Well, I'm not going to go there. But that's the order of things. Growing food, and then he went from there until he got to man, but he was preparing the earth to sustain life for man. He didn't just create man and say, okay, wait right here by the moon, and I'm going to go ahead and create this planet for you to live on. Okay, hold your breath. He didn't do that. He created the things that was necessary for life, and then he placed man on the earth. And then on the Sabbath day, he taught us how to take care of the earth, right? You know, how to take care of the earth, how to take care of one another, and so on and so forth. And he gave us a Sabbath day so that we could learn those things, and the feast days. But guess what? Now we go to church on Sunday. Yahweh's not there teaching. Okay, we have like movable feasts. Yahweh's not there teaching. You know, Yahweh says, look, your new moons, your feast days, no, I can't stand them. I hate them. You know, the meeting is iniquity. You're pushing away the law to do your own thing. I said, meet with me on the seventh day, and this is how you meet with me, or this is how you set the feast, so that I can be there, so you can meet with me during the feast. Yahweh gives us these ordinances, these statutes, these judgments, these laws to teach us righteousness so that he can be our Father, so that we can learn from him. Now, when we don't meet with Yahweh, you know, and listen to Yahweh's teachers, who are we listening to? Right, we're listening to people that say, no, don't use the name of Yahweh. No, you don't need to listen. Who is Yahweh? Remember Pharaoh, who is Yahweh that I should listen to him? You know, look at all of these gods. Surely in a battle, all of these gods would take down Yahweh, right? Yahweh said, no, You can't stand against me in battle. So why don't you keep my law so that you can have life? You're not going to win against Yahweh. Yahweh is not a man of war. Yahweh is a merciful heavenly Father, and he desires that everyone would live. But, it's our own stubbornness, it's our own rebellion that separates us from Yahweh. And this is why we see death. So continuing on here, Pastor goes on and he's talking about the soil. Now the soil, is beneficial. And, thinking about that, the things that we eat actually allow us to become holy and righteous, right? It does. Remember, butter and honey shall you eat so that you can choose righteousness, right? Righteousness is the act of doing what's right. So if what you eat helps you to make right choices, to do the right thing, then that's allowing you to be holy like Yahweh is holy. This is what he says in Leviticus chapter 11 and right around 48. He says, look, if you will do these things, if you learn the difference between the clean and the unclean and eat these things, you can become holy. But he says, if you eat these things that you're not supposed to, then what's going to occur to the mind? Throw out a couple words. You'll become confused. Okay? It's confusion. Okay? And then what? Because your mind is confused, you'll go out and you'll do all of these, you'll perform these acts of perversion, to where you think it's okay, to be involved in same-sex marriages. Then you have bestiality, you have, this pedophilia, you have all of these things because of the confused mind, because you're not, being mindful of taking care of the soil, and you're not mindful of eating the things that Yahweh says you can eat. So all of these things are important. And again, part of the job of the priest is to guard the food supply so that we can have rational minds, so that we can make right decisions. Right? Can y'all see how important that is? It's important. So let's look down to verse 9 here. Okay, it says, the government and its ministries can provide leadership on this. This is what Putin is telling you. Our government should be providing leadership. Instead of that, they're providing leadership in war. So instead of, making sure that the food is healthy, what they're doing is they're generating war and strife and contention, this bitterness, jealousy, and so on. That's all they got their minds focused on, is beating down their enemy while they're allowing something that could starve humanity to death. They're allowing this. Yes, it's starving you right now. There's no food value in the soil. There's no food value left in the soil that we're raising. So let's take a look at, the first pope and how he started this. In Genesis chapter 4, okay? Part of the reason that there's no value in the food here, or in the soil, verse 8, chapter 4, verse 8, Genesis 4:8. Now Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were spread abroad, that Cain rose against Abel his brother and killed him. Then Yahweh said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? And he said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. So now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the soil, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. You shall be a fugitive, and you shall be ever searching for peace on the earth. And Cain said to Yahweh, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall not be seen by your face, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth. For there shall be continual vengeance, or continual war, vengeance, and retaliation. And of course, the rest of it there. But take a look at 12 again. It says, when you work the soil, it shall no longer yield its strength. Remember, all the world has gone the way of Cain, okay, with this murder, this bloodshed, okay, spilling into the ground. That plus a lack of providing the ground with the natural organic elements that's needed, so that it can produce, the minerals and the different things that we need in the food. We have all of these things that's separating us from the source of life. Okay, and this information comes from Yahweh. Yahweh teaches us how to conduct ourselves so that, we can yield this strength from the earth. But when we murder, when we shed blood, when we do these things, the earth, the soil is not going to yield its strength to us. Yahweh shows us this. Remember, Pastor said the microorganisms doesn't listen to what? Sinners, right? Those who break Yahweh's law. The microorganisms are not going to help those who break Yahweh's law. We're cut off. Okay, we're cut off from life. Okay, we're cut off from life. And that's part of the lesson that we need to learn. When we sin, we're cut off from life. Yahweh is not able to help us. it goes on and it shows that over here in verse 22, right at the bottom, Pastor showing that this message, okay, this message that we're talking about right now, the difference between the House of Yahweh and the Catholic Church, this message is going out to all of the world in leaps and in bounds. This information is getting out there. Okay, people are starting to see the difference between, righteousness and evil, the House of Yahweh and the Catholic Church. It's because of this work, the great work that Pastor's doing in these last days. In verse 23, it says, and that right there, we're going to take a big swing to righteousness, because the people are reading this and they read the Pope's letter, they're going to be thinking, they're going to think twice now. They won't be taken into deception so quickly. Okay, they're not going to be taken into deception so quickly because of, the information that the house is bringing out. Now, I was looking at something. I don't have a whole lot of time, so this may be kind of fast. But I looked up, like the divining serpent, okay? And so I'm not going to show it over the deal here because I need to get through this. But the word divine, okay, like in divining serpent, the word divine means to discover or understand something without direct evidence. Okay, so to discover something without direct evidence. Okay, to practice divination. And divination means the practice of using signs such as the arrangement of tea leaves or cards. I mean, do I even need to say more about that? I mean, so to practice divination is the practice of using signs such as the arrangement of tea leaves or cards. Did I hear someone say uno? No? Okay. Cards. And it says here, or special powers to predict the future. Okay, special powers to predict the future. What did Yahweh say? He says, let them foretell them, my two witnesses. Let them tell the future. Because it's Yahweh who set these things in order. I kind of want to read a little bit of that really quick here. Isaiah 44. Isaiah 44. Actually, before I read Isaiah 44, why y'all laughing at me? Okay, let me start here at chapter 43. Okay, 43, let's start. Verse 1, it says, but now this is what Yahweh says, who created you, O Jacob, and he who formed you, O Yisrayl. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. In verse 7, it says, everyone that is called with my name, whom I have created, for my glory I have formed, yes, I have made them. And the reason I read those two is because first, one, he said that, he shows us who his witnesses are, Jacob and Yisrayl. And then he talks about here in verse 7, those who are called with his name. And we know that Pastor has taught us, to take on the name of Yahweh. So we're called with Yahweh's name, showing that, we're in this with the pastor. Okay, we're Yahweh's children. In verse 10, it says, you are my witnesses, says Yahweh, and my servants whom I have chosen. So you may know and believe me and understand that I am he, and before me there was no God formed, nor will there be after me. Verse 12, I have declared and I have saved and I have showed, and no strange God is among you. Therefore you are my witnesses, says Yahweh, that I am Yahweh. Okay, you are my witnesses, Yisrael. You are my witness, Yisrael, that I am Yahweh. So make sure everyone knows who I am. Teach them who I am. Don't hide my name. Make it known to them that I am Yahweh, their heavenly Father. And Yahweh says in 15, I am Yahweh, your Holy One, the Creator of Israel, your King. Okay, Yahweh is our King. Now, Isaiah 44, look at verse 6. Okay, remember, Yahweh just said, I am your King. So this is what Yahweh, the King of Israel and Redeemer, Yahweh of hosts, says. I am the first and the last, and except for me there is no source of power. And who as I will foretell and set in order for me, since I have appointed the ancient people and the things which are coming and will come. Let them foretell them, okay? Let them foretell them. And he's talking about the two witnesses. Do not fear nor be afraid. Have I not told you from that time and have declared you are my witnesses? Is there a source of power except me? Truly there is no rock, no other rock. I know not one. So Yahweh saying, look, I'm your Father. I am Yahweh, your King. Go and tell them the things that I'm inspiring you to teach. Okay? Teach the things that I'm teaching you. Make sure that they know it. Okay? No one else has that authority. And so now, because they've cut themselves off from Yahweh, because they're sinners, what do? Well, here goes some tea leaves over here. Here goes some cards over here. And so on and so forth. Trying to figure out, how things work. Okay, now, It says here also in the definition of divination, it says the art or the practice that seeks to foresee or foretell future events to discover hidden knowledge, usually by the interpretation, okay, of these secret things. And remember what the scripture says, these secret things are revealed to Yahweh's house. You can find those things in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. Okay, 1 Corinthians chapter 2, I don't have time to read it, but it shows that these things were hidden from the princes and the rulers of this world, but was revealed to Yahweh's people, who discern these things. Okay, it's given to Yahweh's people. And it says if the world had known Yahweh's plan, this knowledge that they're seeking after, then they wouldn't have killed the King of Peace. They wouldn't have killed Yeshua. But they don't know Yahweh. They've separated themselves from Yahweh. Okay, and they've gone after the way of Cain. Okay, this greed, this murder, and everything else that goes along with those teachings, which is completely opposite of Yahweh. And quickly, the word serpent, it means a noxious creature that creeps, hisses, or stings. A treacherous person. Okay, a treacherous person. And this word noxious means harmful to living things, physically harmful or destructive to living beings. It says constituting a harmful influence on mind or behavior, especially morally corruption or morally corrupting. And then it says noxious doctrines. Okay, doctrines that's harmful to man. Doctrines that's harmful to human beings. Okay? And I just want to remind you, before I close, I want to remind you of this prophetic word here. Okay? This prophetic word. And this was in November 2008. And in this this is a newsletter, I'm sorry. And in this newsletter, it's showing how they're introducing this lifestyle to our children. Okay, you see here? It says, teach the pleasure of gay sex to children as young as 5, say researchers. And then here it says, school holds surprise gay day for kindergartners. Okay, and this is what's being taught to our children. And look, you would think that this would be going on today, that this is new. No. This newsletter, 2008. November 2008. So you can see that this plan has been going on, or these teachings have been going on for a long time. Okay, but this is what we have to guard ourselves against. This is what we have to teach against. This is what we have to guard our children against. These things that lead to death. Okay, so the Pope on one hand is saying, don't mention the name of Yahweh, do away with the 10 Commandments. All of those things are man-made rules, but yet we continue to see the death rate, is larger than the birth rate. Sickness and disease, is taking a hold of everybody. But then you have Yahweh's servant saying, no, you need to keep Yahweh's laws. This is the only way that you're going to have life, peace, joy, and abundant living. So it's up to us, as individuals, to choose what we're going to do. And Yahweh said, choose life. Okay, and remember Yeshua ben Nun said, hey, as for me and my house, I shall serve Yahweh. May Yahweh bless your understanding. And if you all please stand, turn to the next Kohan, the great Kohan, Kananya Hawkins. Yahweh bless you, man.
Shalom, man. You may be seated. All right, so we'll continue on here. My question for you, first and foremost, is what is your choice? What is your choice this day? Praise Yahweh. Life. All right, so we're going to continue in this sermon here. Chapter 11. The Pope says, don't follow the 10 Commandments. They are only written by men. Follow instead the evil gods of Genesis 3:5. They're only written by men. I guess he didn't even see that Charleston Heston movie of the 10 Commandments where where the 10 Commandments was written there. And of course, that doesn't go quite with the scriptures, but we know that Yahweh told Moshe to take 2 tablets and chisel them out and then write the things that I tell you. Yes, they were written by men. All these things were written by men. The prophecies that were shown in the Holy Scriptures were written by men, but it was under inspiration of Spirit Holy from Yahweh. And of course, those men were inspired to write those things and actually foretell what was going to be taking place in these last days with this beast that is fighting up against, or continually fighting against, this great work that's established in these last days. It's going to be a war, a battle between the two, one bringing forth life and one bringing forth death. Let's look at on page 136. Page 136. We'll pick up where the great Koheleth left off. Of course, that's a hard act to follow, but, when we dwell together in unity, everything, the end result of everything brings forth the perfect peace, the life, the joy, the abundant living that Yahweh has foretold that his house would actually bring. And we're going to get a little bit into that later, talking about what this work of Yahweh, this house of Yahweh, will bring forth. Let's look at verse 51. It says, well, riches don't bring salvation, and neither do your words, speaking to the Pope, he's still, pastor speaking to the Pope, that you're putting out against the laws of Yahweh. They won't bring salvation. Blessed are those who keep Yahweh's laws, because they only have right to the tree of life. That's Revelations 22:14. Now, everybody in here remembers how many trees Yahweh said was going to be in existence from the time of the very beginning all the way to this time right now. How many? Just 2. Now, eventually, there's only going to remain one tree. Only going to be one tree remaining. But from the very beginning up until now, there were 2 trees, right? And one is the tree that brings forth the mixture of righteousness and evil, and the other is the tree that brings forth life. And the members that are of that tree are considered the fruits of that tree. And we also, as being trees, our fruits are made evident through the works that we bring forth. And this is what Pastor is getting ready to say here. He says, they won't bring salvation. Blessed are those who keep Yahweh's laws, because they only have right to the tree of life. And I don't remember if any of you remember, I don't know if any of you remember what was brought out concerning that word right and what it means concerning those who will actually qualify for this great kingdom. But that right, there's a lot that goes with that word right, and it includes even the word superhuman. And pastors brought out the things about preternatural and having use of the subconscious mind. The book There Is Someone Out There, it goes into great detail. He talks a little bit about the great human potential and what we as mankind have the ability to become with the use of the subconscious mind. And that's something that we actually have to look forward to. But remember, that mankind right now, they seek to be able to tap into the use of the subconscious mind. Back in the time period of the 50s and the 60s, or maybe even before that, the 40s, different nations were doing experiments on humans. They would take people who were in mental asylums and prisons and people who they thought were worthless to society. They didn't have anything worth living for anyway. And they would do experiments on them, and they would try to find things in their brains to keep them from dying, find things that would give them extra abilities and so forth. And they're looking for all these things in this gobbledygook jelly that is inside of our head called a brain, but they don't realize that you can't just go in there and with tools manipulate and unlock the superpowers that Yahweh has in there. It can only be attained through righteousness. And Pastor told us that a long time ago. Now, we see some instances where there are accidents that take place with people. They're bumped their head, or something else is compromised as a result, and now they have accidentally tapped into this great human potential. But they didn't acquire it through righteousness. And we've seen a little bit of it through the scriptures, through the prophets. We saw it through our high priest Yeshua and what he was able to do before he ascended to the high priest. And we're going to have that full force when we actually qualify for it. But it's only going to be acquired through righteousness. We can't trick Yahweh. We can't trick the microorganisms. We can't trick them and make them think that we're a part of the tree of life, when in fact we were actually doing things that brought forth death to ourselves and to others. But it's the rights that's going to be granted to those who prove themselves faithful to Yahweh on the day that Yeshua goes forth in power, that Yahweh in effect goes forth in power. But this is something that the Catholic Church, that the Christianity doesn't understand, that Yahweh does these things, and in a lot of the work he does, he always does it through his servants. So, like it was said, Yahweh does the work and mankind gets the glory. Now, you don't see that in the mentality of mankind. Usually the servant does the work and the owner, the head gets the glory, But this is what Yahweh is bestowing upon us. This is the love and the care that he has for us. We're not going to add anything to Yahweh when we keep his law, nor will we take anything from him when we break it. He says, this is what you're going to bring upon yourself if you fail to keep these laws. And it includes the Pope. It includes all of the Catholic Church and the Vatican. And this is what you bring upon yourself if you keep these laws. And even examples are given in the Scriptures where the apostles showed that even the Christianity, even the God worship, they received certain of the blessings that came through keeping the law, and they didn't even realize why they were receiving this blessing. They didn't even realize that they were actually keeping a law of Yahweh. And we see many examples of that, but it's the whole body of the law that this group, this administration is being taught. The complete knowledge, the complete understanding and wisdom is being presented in these last days. And if we will take it unto ourselves, then yes, we will qualify for this Revelations 22:14 to have right to the tree of life. Now, verse 12 shows you that Yeshua is doing the talking. Verse 7 of Matthew 7, it shows your tree. Well, let's look to Matthew 7, verse 15 through 20. Let's see what Pastor's talking about there, because he's still talking to the Pope, and he's really pointing these things out to him, because that's his job, is to teach. Let them foretell. Let's see, Matthew 7, and let's look at 15. Oh, I'm in Yochanan. I'm like, oh, that don't look right. In chapter 7, there we go. In verse 15, and it says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorns or figs from thistles? Likewise, every righteous tree brings forth righteous fruit." And that's what we see coming forth from the tree of life in these last days, the work, the teachings of the house of Yahweh, the one sent. He can't bring forth fruits of iniquity. He can't bring forth evil fruits. He's ordained only to bring forth righteous fruits. This house of Yahweh only brings forth the message of the laws of Yahweh, the message of the kingdom, which is righteous fruits. Okay, that's the work that is presented from the house of Yahweh, and that's why we need to guard the house of Yahweh, because we are the tillage of Yahweh. We are the fruits, the work of Yahweh. We are the representatives. We are the light that Yeshua said in Matthew chapter 5 of this world. So we need to make sure that our works, our light, our teachings, the words that come forth from our mouth, our example is that of the character of Yahweh when we interact in the world. Otherwise, we're bad examples. Now, that doesn't take away from Yahweh. That doesn't take away from the house of Yahweh. The person can't say, well, the house of Yahweh is now bringing forth this unrighteousness. No, that individual made that choice on their own. And every man will be judged according to his own works. But the house of Yahweh brings forth life. It brings forth the tree of life. It brings forth the fruits that shown here in verse 17, the righteous fruits. But a tree of evil brings forth fruit of iniquity. And that's what the Pope is saying. Oh, you don't need to follow those 10 commandments. They're only written by man. Follow what I'm saying. Wait a minute, now the Pope's a man. Okay, so how do we get around that? The words of man. It just doesn't fit. Well, I know he's the vicar of Christ. All right. Or maybe it was viceroy. No, that was cigarettes. Or was it ziggurat? I can't remember. Either way, it's all confusion. It came from Babylon, and he's still bringing forth this confusion. Well, every tree which does not, I skipped the verse, in verse 18, a righteous tree cannot bring forth fruit of iniquity, nor can a tree of evil bring forth fruits of righteousness. Every tree which does not bring forth righteous fruit is cut down and cast in the fire. Therefore, by their fruits, by their works, you will know them. Now, unless you're an arborist or you are a farmer who can go and look at a tree and see, oh, yeah, well, that's a pear tree, or that's an apple tree, or that's an orange tree, or a lemon tree, or that's a watermelon tree, or something like that. You guys realize there's no such thing as watermelon tree, right? Watermelon tree? Okay. They grow on the vine, right? Although I think if them, were to actually fall off the tree, there'd be a lot of people getting injured as a result. But unless you're able to look at the tree and tell, like in the fall of the year, for instance, when that particular tree is not bringing forth fruit, or the spring before it actually brings forth any fruit, you would not be able to tell that tree lest you see its fruit. Well, it's the same thing with the people of Yahweh. People don't recognize us as being members of the house of Yahweh until they see our fruits. Until we open our mouths and we speak, and we're saying, occur, and transpire, or blessed, or thankful, and things like that. Or can you work? No, I don't work Saturdays. That's my Sabbaths. Or, oh, I don't ever see you wearing shorts. I don't ever see you doing this, or you don't do that. You never party. You don't drink or anything like that. Oh, you're one of those Yahwehs. Yeah, I should have known right off the grip. You're one of those Yahwehs. And so they see our works, and they can tell who we belong to, because we're not falling from the tree like the apple, but we are a perfect example of what is brought forth in that tree, which is righteousness only. Let's look at verse 52. So righteousness, or righteous fruit, Pastor's saying, righteous fruit is keeping the laws of Yahweh. In 1 Shachanan 3:4, 7 through 8, we have that example too. It says, those who will not bring forth this righteous fruit, as Matthew 7 is showing, will be gathered up and will be cast into the fire. It will leave them neither root nor branch. And of course, Malachi chapter 4:1 tells us about what's going to take place with those who will not repent. Acts 3:19 gives the instruction, and then Yahweh gives us the time, He gives us the space, He gives us the opportunity to repent and be converted so that our sins may be blotted out. If we don't, then our sins are still there as a testimony against us, written on our forehead, written on our hands. These are the things we think about. This is the work we do. It's written in our genes. Yahweh can see that, and by that work, that's what we're going to be judged by. You won't have any keys left for any blood at all. There's nothing that will ever bring forth your fruit again, he says. Let's look a little further down there. He says, well, think of an oven or on a cook stove, talking about the burning that Malachi is talking about, this burning like an oven. Think bigger. Think nuclear oven. A nuclear oven starting with the nuclear baby found in our book called Birth of the Nuclear Baby. And if you're looking at the news and paying attention, you can see how things are heating up in and around the great river Euphrates. In fact, where they're calling it right now in Turkey, a military coup is taking place where the military has pretty much shut down roads, shut down offices. They've taken over the airport, stopped flights from going in and out. They don't know where Erdogan is right now, who's the president. The prime minister is, I don't know what he's saying now, if it is a coup or not, whatnot. They've already, just in the last half an hour, 45 minutes, shot down a military jet, the fighter jets have. And there's a lot of things that are taking place in and around the great river Euphrates. Our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. And so we really need to put forth every single ounce of effort. Pastor said, not last week, but the week before, I believe, that we need to be extreme in overcoming. Put every single ounce of energy we have in showing Yahweh that we want this kingdom more than all else, like the vow that we made when we got our ear awed. And we show it by not, oh, Yahweh, I want this kingdom, yeah. You can't do it that way. How is it done? By our works, right? Our works show what's in our hearts. Our words also show what's in our hearts. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth truly speaks. If this is a great treasure before us, and we desire this kingdom more than all else, then that's what our every thought, our every word, our every action is going to be pushing towards, bringing this kingdom about and entering into it, because we know that it is through this kingdom that we're going to put an end to all suffering that mankind has brought about themselves because of the teaching that has come from this person that says, oh, you don't need to follow the 10 Commandments. Oh, they were only written by men. Follow the gods. Practice this sodomy. Remember, the apostle said, if Yahweh would not have left us a remnant, we would all become like Sodom. That's what our hope would have been. That's what our end would have been. If Yahweh had not left a remnant of righteous beings, righteous men and women, who would stand up for His laws and teach it to the world. That's the downward slope that mankind would have gone because of the inspiration of Satan. And in doing so, she would have destroyed mankind. because you can't bring forth life through sodomy. You can't bring forth life through adultery and fornication. All those things bring forth death. You would eventually, like the scripture says, there is a power surrounding your land that is bringing your strength down. Sin is that power that brings the strength down, the teachings of iniquity that brings the strength of mankind down to where they will have life no more. Well, let's look down to verse 53, kind of in that bold part in the middle. It says, by the witness Yisrayl. Of course, Khan just got finished reading about the witness and what they would do in Isaiah, but he's in Matthew 24:14 talking about this message being preached. He says, by the witness Yisrayl, this message will be preached by the witness Yisrayl, for Yahweh will be with him. He will preach this message to all the nations. Complete. And it shows that it will be a complete work that he's doing. In fact, keep in mind here, if you're in Revelation chapter 4, verse 6, it'll be complete. Revelation chapter 4, verse 6. I'm sorry. It's actually 5, verse 6. I wrote 4. I meant 5. And he's talking about the 7 scrolls here. And, of course, remember here where this was all shut up in the time of Daniel. And the Malach was bringing these things to Yachanan, and he was weeping bitterly in verse 4, in chapter 5, verse 4, because he saw there was no one found worthy to open the seals and read it. And, of course, in verse 6, it says, and I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and the 4 living creatures, and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb, though it had been slain, had been, past tense, having complete power and complete knowledge and complete understanding, which signify and represent the complete plan of Yahweh. All right? Sent forth into all the earth. Well, it is sent forth into all the earth, but how is it done? Yeshua didn't, I know everybody thinks they saw Jesus, and he's already, it's probably his 8th or 9th or 10th return by now. I haven't kept track. But, the coming of Jesus, and everybody's just waiting for it. Actually, they're waiting for the rapture. Zechariah chapter 5. Turn over to Zechariah chapter 5. But Jesus is already here doing damage to the earth. But he does this it's going throughout all the earth, and just keep this in mind in Zechariah chapter 5. And look at verse 5. He says, then the Malach who was speaking with me came forward and said to me, lift up your eyes now and understand which is sent by commandment. In verse 6, and I asked, what is it? He said, this is the ephah, the standard of perfection, which is sent by Yahweh's laws. Then he added, this is honor, knowledge, and understanding throughout the whole earth. And remember what was just shown here in Revelation chapter 5, what this Malach, this being had, who sat on the throne, who once was slain or had been slain, but now he sits on the throne in heaven. He is going to send this throughout the whole earth. Well, in Zechariah, we see that it's going throughout the whole earth as well. But we also see back in verse 4 that there are 2 men who are ordained to actually bring this forth. And in verse 11 of chapter 5, we see that they're going to do it in a Babylonish land, which does not yet exist at the time this prophecy was written. We'll turn over to Matthew chapter 24:14. Well, don't turn there, but for your notes, which is what we just read here, in Matthew 24:14, we see how this prophecy is fulfilled through the preaching and the publishing of the message of Yahweh as sent by the one who brings forth the witness of Yahweh, or who is the witness of Yahweh. All right, so let's look over to, move a little bit here. Well, let's look down to, so Pastor talks about in verse 54, go over to Zechariah. It shows you even the one who will preach it, speaking about this message, who will be giving you all of this opposition, giving the Pope all of this opposition, because it speaks of him as being Zerubbabel, which is one who opposes Babylon. It tells you, it names it out, it even shows you in chapter 6, verse 9, and the verses 11 through 12. In chapter 6, verse 11 through 13, that's Zechariah. Let's see here. There was something else I wanted to point out. Well, we'll have to move forward. Let's look over to page 137. So anyways, he's showing the pastor's going back into history, showing about the 2 witnesses and the 7-lamp lampstand, because you got to repeat these things so people can understand. It's going to the Pope. The Pope knows these things. He's ignoring them. That's why he's a teacher of iniquity. That's why he's considered a tree that brings forth fruit of iniquity. That Vatican, that whole system, In verse 61, it says in verse 5, let's see, he was talking about Daniel 12 here. Verse 5, he says, "And the Malach talked with me and answered and said to me, do you not know who these are?" Let's see, yeah, that's Daniel 12, right? "Now wake up, Pope Francis, wake up. He's asking you here and going to give you an answer. What are these two olive trees that are shown in Revelations 11? What are these two olive trees?" Well, look down a little bit there. It says, "The lampstand that you took, you stole from the temple, which was once called the House of Yahweh. You took it to," I'm sorry, let me back up. "The lampstand which you took, you stole from you stole from the temple, which was once called the House of Yahweh, and you changed it to the word temple, and then killed people because they called it the House of Yahweh. You murdered a lot of people for using the name Yahweh, pretending that you were doing this out of righteousness. You saying, don't mention the name Yahweh, when in actual fact you were doing it to hide the righteousness of Yahweh that you did not want to follow." And this is a common characteristic feature amongst sinners who hate righteousness. King Herod, had the same mindset. Yochanan the Immerser told him it's not right that you have your brother's wife. Now, where in the world did Yochanan get that from? Oh, he got it from some old laws that were written only by men. In fact, that's even in the Ten Commandments. Well, how dare you bother me with facts and figures, Yochanan? Why do you bother me with the truth? Well, the only way to shut his mouth up is to kill him. They understood the power and the strength that came forth from, as one of the apostles put it, boasting of mine, the preaching and the publishing of the message, because that message changed the hearts and the minds of the people. And they were, even though they tried not to show it, they were afraid of the people finding out about this message, because they wouldn't believe, their minds would no longer be blinded and clouded by the God worship and the deception and the darkness that they were wanting to present, so they can wield this power and control over the people for the purpose of wealth. The Catholic Church is, as Pastor mentions in here, the richest organization on the face of this earth, and they are, they're fine with what they have. The only thing that they want a little more of is what their neighbor has. That's it. But as they expand out, everybody's continually being their neighbor. And that's what we've seen over the years, is that they've murdered, they slaughtered, they've taken, they've murdered, they're slaughtered, they put out propaganda, hatred, one for another, setting every man against his neighbor, all under the guise of righteousness. They call them holy wars to make it seem righteous. You're doing this in the name of the Lord, and that's what they thought. When they kill you, they'll think that they're doing their God a favor. Let's look over to page 138. So in verse 64, he's showing here Zechariah in 4:6. So he answered and he spoke to me, saying, "This is the word of Yahweh to Zerubbabel, the one who opposes Babylon, saying, not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit." My spirit? Or write down in your own Bible, go and read it now, John. They translated it John. His name was Yochanan, but it's John. Yochanan 6:63 shows you what the Spirit of Yahweh is. There are the words, or these are the words. Now see, that's an Oki word right there. These are. You see that contraction right there? If you got your book. These are the words you said were written by man that we shouldn't follow. That's the 10 Commandments. That's 613 laws. Perfect laws that will bring the world out of sickness, disease, and of course wars. And after this message is preached by the house of Yahweh, and of course Malachi 4:1-3 and Isaiah 2:1, we see the establishment of the house of Yahweh, then they're going to learn war no more. And it's not an overnight process, unless you count a night as Yahweh counts a day, as a day is as 1,000 years, but it takes time to convert a people. First of all, you've got to get an administration set up. You've got to get all the infrastructure laid out. You've got to get the law set in the minds of those who will be teachers and guiding. You got to make sure that they understand the rules and the regulations, so that when they are given their crowns and they're set in their position, it's kind of like what they talk about when they're launching a business, this new venture. You have an opportunity to get a ground floor opportunity, because after this launch date goes out, then it's going to fly off the shelves like crazy. And so this is what Yahweh's given us, a ground floor opportunity to build upon this foundation that He has given us, the laws and the prophets, and with Yeshua being the cornerstone, so that once this great work is, spread throughout the entire universe, we're going to have a really great honorable position. Yahweh guarantees that. Praise Yahweh. And people are going to be looking to us because they know that we have the answers. And our true concern is for the people. It's for taking care of them. It's for seeing to their needs, protecting them from the things that bring harm, and so forth. And, Pastor says in verse 69, he talks about the flesh being useless, because that's where mankind puts their trust in. They put their trust in the flesh. He says it's worthless without the laws. The Spirit of Yahweh is what begot Yeshua, and it grew in him and took over him. Or in other words, you can use is it overshadowed him. You go back to the first book of Yisrayl, making the connection, and Pastor goes into great detail about this Spirit Holy and how we can obtain it, and how it should overshadow us, and how it actually overshadowed people in the time, in the history of the House of Yahweh, and how it changed their mind, how it guided their work, how it guided their decisions, and so forth. Well, it did this to Yeshua as well, and he actually qualified through the choices that he made. He had to make these choices. It was no hocus pocus diddly docus. Yeah, Yeshua made the choice to follow Yahweh, to serve Yahweh, and that's what he said Satan. That's what he told to Satan when she tried to test him. He said, no, Yahweh your Father you must reverence, and him only must you serve. I'm going to serve Yahweh. And of course, I know we're running a little short on time, but as we qualify for these things, as he talks about in verse 74, the microorganisms, one day we're going to have the ability to have control over these things. We're going to have the ability to control the microorganisms, to bring forth healthy fruit, to bring forth healthy vegetables. The things that our cattle eat and so forth are going to be healthy, because the world right now, as he mentioned in this article that this Dr. Baker showed, I think it's like 0.01% of the soil actually is healthy. But we're going to restore it. We're going to put the beneficial microorganisms back in it, and as a result, man, I'm telling you, brothers, you wait to the kingdom. Many of you who have lived quite a few years know the difference in the depletion of what foods tasted like several years back to what they taste like now. And when we get into the kingdom, oh man, talk about mouth watering. I mean, strawberries, cherries, apricots, everything is going to taste great. I mean, it's going to be so delicious. Not only will the food taste great because it's healthy, but our bodies are going to be healthy, where all of our taste buds and all of our receptors in our minds are going to be functioning 100%, and we're going to get just bursting flavors in our I don't know, you might pass out after you eat a piece of watermelon or something like that. It's just going to be so delicious that we'll never ever want it to go back to that. And we're going to realize why food became tasteless, kind of like that old Soylent Green movie, because of sin. And that's what we see in the world right now, is that it's the laws of Yahweh, the iniquity that is coming forth from this Catholic Church, where the Pope says, don't follow these laws, follow the gods. It is bringing the strength of all the world, all the nation down. Well, of course, they're doing the same thing that Satan and the gods who follow her have done in heaven, and that's another place that we're going to have to restore after it's all said and done. But we'll take our training seriously, believe into the one sent, and we show our belief through our obedience, and Yahweh will raise us up in these last days before all the world. So may Yahweh bless your understanding.